Kia ora te whanau. We're going to get going because time's running out. Te no mai, haere mai, ko Simon Wilson aho. I wanted to speak just at the start a little bit about Joe Hawke and what he did for Auckland. To my mind, one of the great Aucklanders, a great New Zealander. Many of you, most of you I hope, will know that this city was founded on the goodwill of Ngāti Whātua, who gifted and made available at very low rates the land of the city. The government then took that land, sold it to settlers and at much higher prices, and the income that the government got from those sales to settlers enabled the infrastructure of the city to be built, the roads, the sewers, the hospitals, and so on. Done on the goodwill of Ngāti Whātua. And that process kept going and kept going and kept going until Ngāti Whātua had almost no land left. And then in 1976, the government decided it would sell the land it had been gifted by Ngāti Whātua at Bastion Point for luxury housing. And at that point, Ngāti Whātua said, enough. For 506 days, they occupied the land, their land, in protest, with enormous support from all over the country. And in the end, they were taken off, they were thrown off, they were arrested. But the outcome of it was that the land eventually was given by the government in 1988 back to Ngāti Whātua. And in 1991, a treaty settlement, there was an act of parliament which made it clear that there was a legal basis to do that and that Ngāti Whātua had the rights to that land. And if you think about Ngāti Whātua now, with the healthcare they provide, the housing they've built, the nursery, that's a plant nursery for the city that they run, the cultural well-being that they generate, and the enormous, massive property portfolio that they now have on the basis of I think it was an $18 million treaty settlement, now worth well above $1 billion. They've done well. And there is a lesson in what Joe Hawke led. And the lesson is, to me, change always looks like it's really hard. But when it happens, it turns out to be easy. Easy to live with, productive and valuable. And I think that's Joe Hawke's great legacy to this city. I mean, there are many legacies, but I think that's an important one for us today. Change is very hard, but when you make the change, it turns out the battle was over a whole lot of things you really didn't need to be fighting about at all. And that takes us to the centre of Auckland City. Now, Greg Clark, you may have noticed Greg Clark in his presentation mentioned Melbourne and the Grand Prix in Melbourne, the largest footfall of any event in Australia. That happened because the Premier at the time, Jeff Kennett, announced and campaigned on the basis that he wanted every major event in Australia to be in Melbourne. He took that event from Adelaide. He sucked it all up into Melbourne, and Melbourne has prospered on the back of it. And I'm not going to sit here and advocate that Auckland should do that with every event in the country here, but it is a lesson that Auckland needs major events. It is a lesson that Auckland needs political leadership who are determined to make the city succeed. Phil O'Reilly also mentioned Melbourne, pointed out that Melbourne had been a city like Auckland terribly, terribly suffering from COVID, but has bounced back better than we have. In my Herald column today, I mentioned that there are 38 empty shops on Queen Street. That's from the Wellesley Street intersection north, just going down. It doesn't count any of the shops in the arcades. I may have got the count wrong. I did it by riding my bicycle down the street yesterday. I wasn't on the footpath because I don't believe in endangering pedestrians, and I was on the road, which means that I was being endangered by buses and cars. And there is still an extraordinary number of people in this country, in this city, in the leadership positions in this city, who do not understand we need to separate pedestrians, scooters and bikes, cars and buses. But I digress. Welcome to Saving the City Centre, also known as Rejuvenating it to a place with a vibrant beat, skip in its step, and welcome to all. Also known as Why Are There Empty Shops in Queen Street? The panel today, Mark Thomas. Mark Thomas is from the Committee for Auckland, been going for well over 20 years now, I think. Mark hasn't been with them for well over 20 years, but he's here from them today. Mark is also the chair of the Night Shelter Trust and a member of the Rough Sleepers Steering Group in Auckland. We have Emma McInnes, who is a designer and the co-founder of Women in Urbanism, and Troy Clarry from Catalina Hotels. Troy is a national board member of Hospitality NZ and also the general manager of the Accommodation Association of New Zealand. Troy is a late replacement in the lineup for Franz Mascarenhas, who is from Cordis, but who is not here today because of COVID. I'm going to make some introductory remarks, a few more. They'll each introduce their thoughts on the topic, and then we'll talk. I have some questions. Why does construction get to dictate the look and feel of the streets? Are the political structures we have fit for purpose? Why are there not more cargo e-bikes? Why do some people still think this is a debate about car parking? Where are the police? How do the plans and visions for the city inform what actually happens here? What will happen to Koitu's provocation? And just on Koitu's provocation, you'll have heard earlier, if you didn't know already, that they have 9 ideas of how the city might evolve. I want to throw a few more in. We could be a bicultural city. That wasn't directly addressed by Koitu. We could be a climate action city. We could be a high-wage city. And we could be a safe city. Just on the bicultural city, we heard in the earlier session from Trina Tamati and Tanya Polferi, enormously disturbing to my mind statistics of the gap between Māori and Pākehā in this city. Those statistics, I hope, worried everybody and had us all recognise there is much work to be done in that area. More questions. What's going to happen to all the empty offices? Why are there empty shops in Queen Street? Emma.
Kia ora. Kia ora, ko Emma Tukuinga. Thank you for the introduction. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for mentioning biking down Queen Street, and particularly cargo bikes. I have a 5-month-old daughter and she loves the bike. When we're on a bike path, she loves to fall asleep in that, and it's been it's a really nice introduction to parenthood, being able to get her to sleep in that. But Queen Street is not my route, and it's because someone come up with the idea to put planters where there should be a protected cycle lane, and so it hasn't made it a super inclusive city for myself or my daughter or my family. And Queen Street is one of those, I would probably say, is the thing that's really letting down Auckland city centre at the moment. I'm actually really positive about the city. I think that there's a lot of hope and a lot of potential. When I go out, and it's not Queen Street, to other parts of the city, whether it be places activated by the City of Colour Festival, it's just teeming with people, and I see this at night and in the middle of the day. There's lots of people using our city, particularly families at the moment, but we need to get better at giving them more offerings. There's not many places where you can buy shoes for your child in the city centre. There's not many places where they can just wriggle around on the floor, or even changing tables. So if you're wondering where the people are, well, a lot of people are working from home, and so we should be targeting people like families who have that time in the middle of the day to spend in our city centre and bring, I guess, life and vibrancy back to our city centre. But there's not many offerings for them. But when I have seen offerings, they're the people that are there using it. And so in terms of the shops, I think there's a lot of potential with those empty shops. And if businesses would just, be a bit more innovative and look at filling them with, there's a lot of community groups across Auckland that are looking for places to host their groups. There's a lot of like fashion students, for example, looking to do pop-up stores, or there's a lot of artists that are looking for places to, exhibit. And so there's plenty of potential with those 38 empty stores, but businesses really need to support their community so that their community can in return support them. But yeah, that's just what I'll say on that for now.
Thank you, Emma. Troy?
I've got a bit of a history with Auckland and the city. I sit on the destination committee, which came about because of the targeted rate. And initially, it was something that was to support accommodation providers, but within that, we got the experience to actually look at what drives the city, and working with then ATEED and now with Auckland Unlimited. And I think a lot of the themes that were touched on today, and we spoke about this before, were already in place. I loved Greg's presentation because it's looking at 100 cities, and we are the last of those 100. I assure you, we're well behind in any of those cities. But what the ability we have is to be able to look at what Greg was saying and learn from that, look at all of the things that we miss because of COVID in the city, and we can actually pick and choose what we want our city to look like. Because, don't get me wrong, I think the city is probably in the state that we've got not a blank bit of paper. We've got a lot of things to work out in the city, but we can actually start and say, what does our city really want to look like? But we've got to do this really quickly. In less than 100 days, we have our first cruise ship coming in, and those people on that cruise ship, they're not going to write letters home talking about Auckland. They're going to be on their phones, and within 35 seconds of hitting Queen Street or going a bit above the viaduct, they're going to be saying, there's 38 shops being closed up here, and what's going on, and we're the homeless. And when I came to Auckland last time, this is the story that they'll be telling. So we've already got tourists coming in. I've got tourists coming to my hotel saying, hey, we're great. We're up in Whangaparoa, which is lovely up there, but they don't want to come into the city. We hear stories of people from Christchurch not want to come up to Auckland. We've got to ask those questions, why? And I think there's a lot around that. You know, obviously the safety issue is a massive issue in Auckland at the minute. Is it real? Is it perception? And I think it's actually both. But we've really got to fix that perception issue. I think the students, international students, we've got a massive potential to get these students into the city, and they are the life of a city, and we miss them dearly. But we're struggling to get them back. You know, all of the immigration settings and everything around us, that students are not wanting to come back. One big thing, I've just got a personal friend who has said no to sending their kid down here from Asia because of the safety issues they hear. So this is something we've got to address. It's not only in Auckland, it's not only in New Zealand, it's now international that this image is coming across there. Obviously, there's some great things that Auckland Unlimited was working on before all of this, and the city around its culture, the art, the whole Maori tourism piece is incredible, and that's where the storytelling comes. And there's things that are already in place well before COVID, and we just need to drag them back out again and take the bits that we think are going to work for us. And who would have ever thought we're actually a UNESCO City of Music? So let's use that. Really use it. No one knows that. And I think we really should be using those things from now on. Shopping, being a safe environment, and our nightlife is so important. And nightlife is not just about the late night economy and all of that. It's about having groups of mums come in at 4 o'clock and having some cocktails or whatever it might be, and going home at 6:30 on the bus. So it's those types of things that make it work for all people.
That's what you meant to say, isn't it?
Oh no, I'm having coffee, lots of coffee at the moment, not cocktails yet.
Sure. So I've got sort of 4 things I think that really, I don't want to take up too much time, Mark. Is obviously the first thing we've got to get the city safe, and whatever that and around that, and that perception around that is so important. We've got to get those who we want back into the city back in here, whether it's a lot of the work that Heart of the City is doing at the minute. We've got to get those students and companies bringing people back. We've got lots of events that are coming online, but we've got to make sure that those are all coming in, and the people are safe and they enjoy their time here. We've got to support those businesses that choose to open in those 38 stores. And a lot of the business associations here are doing great jobs, but that support needs to be there. You've got to remember, we're still coming out of COVID. A lot of those, we're tired. I'm physically tired because of what we've gone through over those 2 years. Now we're going through, we haven't got any staff, and we've got all these other issues coming on. They need support in order to be able to get them through, and they need that from those associations that are helping people. And then lastly, we've got to share those stories, share the good stories, what's going on around us, and that's going to change that perception. So, yeah, just a little stat, Queen Street, $500 million worth of revenue for the city, and that was about 1/3 of the retail and spend that Auckland had. So it's a massive amount of money. I worked in Ginza in Japan, in Tokyo. Of course, who would have ever imagined, and that will never ever happen, that we would have the hotels in Ginza used the way our hotels were used over this COVID period. So we needed to step up, and we needed to say no to what was happening in our city when it was happening, I believe at that time. We can't change that now, but we can actually move forward and just protecting the city against things that we don't like happening in it. Police, one little thing. Japan, you always say, why does Japan is so safe? And it's got this image of of safety. And I was thinking, why is that? And every day I walk to work in Ginza, and there's a police box right in the corner in the middle of Ginza. I go to Roppongi, have a few cocktails, and there's a police box right in the middle of Roppongi. And I go home into my little area in my little village, and there's a police box right in the corner. So police, I think, is so important going forward and where we are in the country, and unfortunately that's where we are.
Thank you. Mark.
So the question was, why are there 38 shops closed? And the short answer, my short answer, is we've had a global pandemic. But that's less interesting than what we do about it, which is really at the heart of your question. Where are we now? And before we start focusing on the actions that we need to take now to revitalise, re-energise the city, I just want to make us clear from our perspective that we had issues with the way development was happening in Auckland before COVID. So we had development challenges, planning and implementation challenges before, particularly in the central city. I mean, the city centre master plan, which is the planning tool that the council uses, has really quite broad support and wide endorsement, but we weren't making enough progress with that. And so the implementation challenge before COVID was not being quicker, nimble enough. And actually we've seen other challenges with COVID, of course. I mean, there are placemaking capability challenges, right? We have, of course, an entity, and this isn't about blaming anyone, and entities that have different responsibilities. We've got too many moving parts in the central city, which makes it sometimes hard to make progress. When you've got one part of council, for example, responsible for one thing, you've got other parts of council responsible for different things, and sometimes I think citizens would say, who do I go to for this? And the last thing really, of course, is the COVID-specific challenges. The tenancies, Simon, you talk about the social housing issues. Of course, we lost the backpackers. We've replaced the backpacker with social housing. That's a challenge we have to unpick. And so I want to tie the solution to the central city into resolving the issues that we had before COVID. I think that's a really important thing to say. It's one piece. And I think, if we think that there is, people are using all these words, crisis, and we use that with climate change, and then we don't implement a plan that's consistent with the crisis. So I'm kind of wary about using that word. I think let's be clear-sighted about what the challenges are in the central city. The biggest thing that's holding us back from recovering from the pandemic is not having people back. We've adopted a very conservative policy as a country for managing COVID. I'm not going to make a comment on that. But a consequence to that is, of course, we're slow to reopen. And if that's true, and that might be fine from a health perspective, we then have to think, well, what else should we be doing if that's our primary response to COVID? What other additions should we be doing? What other interventions, for example, should the central city be calling on? And I've got a particular idea that I want to moot, but maybe we'll let the conversation
We'll come back to that. Thank you, Mark. Thank you all. None of you have argued that the centre of the city is unimportant, so we're going to take it as read that it is, that the city needs a vibrant centre because that's partly because that's how everybody else judges the city.
Can I make a brief intervention?
Yes, and partly because it is the way in which all the things, it's the biggest residential area of the country, it's the biggest employment area of the country, it's the biggest commercial area of the country, it's the banking centre, it's the corporate centre, all of those things are in the middle of the city. And you could say that in 20 years' time that won't be the case, but we're not going to hang around for 20 years and let it all die. We want to make this work because the rest of the city and therefore the country works because of it. Do you want to add to that?
Briefly, agglomeration is still a thing, right? So it's been around for a while. This is the idea of clustering individuals and organizations to produce greater value than they would do by themselves. The World Economic Forum did a study late last year looking at the impact of COVID because everyone's working from home. Well, that's not true. I've been in the US recently, in Australia, and we are seeing people move back. We heard earlier today, congestion is actually getting back to where it was. People are certainly working more days at home, that's for sure. But what the World Economic Forum said, actually, although working from home benefits employees by saving time commuting, it deprives firms of the benefits that come from knowledge spin-overs and information sharing. And the research that they did said GDP will be maximised if employees work from home just 1 or 2 days a week. So they get some personal benefit, but we still optimise the GDP.
1 or 2 days a week, of course, means 20% or 40% of what used to be the life of the city has disappeared. It's still a really big change, so we have to deal with that. The reason I asked why are there so many empty shops is twofold. One of them is we can talk about the factors why those shops are empty, and COVID obviously is one of the reasons. The rise of Commercial Bay, the rise of Britomart, and the rise of 277, the new Westfield development, and other developments mean that people have, a lot of the shopkeepers have themselves migrated. They've gone to a better offer, to a better place. And it is, to my mind, particularly instructive that both Commercial Bay and Britomart are largely pedestrianised zones. You know, they don't rely on people parking outside the shop in order to work, but they clearly do work. So there's a factor there. There's a whole lot of changes that have happened. Offices have moved as the Wynyard Quarter has developed, and so have offices. The first point that worries me is that while all that's been happening, and it predates COVID, the property owners of Queen Street have watched it and not done very much, to my mind, to respond. They haven't said, somebody's eating our lunch and we need to get it back. They've watched it being eaten and are upset about it. And the second point, to my mind, is that it doesn't matter if all the office workers will come back. I assume most of them will. It doesn't matter what else you do. It doesn't matter if you make Queen Street a pedestrian heaven or a car driver's heaven or anything else. If you don't have the shops open, people won't have a reason to be in Queen Street. They won't have enough of a reason. They don't all have to be shops selling things. They can be shops displaying things and selling you a coffee and doing all sorts of things. But the shops have to be functional or people won't stay or come to or be in Queen Street. So to my mind, it starts with the shops. And therefore, the question is, don't we need to do everything we can to get the shops open? Don't the landlords, the council, and everybody else have to get on board and say, we need to open all these shops? Emma?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. The businesses and council supporting them need to be very community minded, and that's why my idea is, you know, filling them with community groups, and also just making sure that the offerings are relevant to the things that people need. Like, I think a few of the shops that have closed down have also been those that, you know, are selling kiwi fruit, lip balm, and those aren't really the things that people need at the moment. Sorry to be insensitive, but you know, making sure that there's a good range of offerings, things that people actually need. And like I said, you know, as a young mother, I'm missing a lot of the things that would make my life a lot easier, being able to shop downtown for my children. But also, we can't just focus on places where people go to spend their money. We have to make sure that a lot of those places are places where you can come for free. As a mother, I also really value being able to take my baby to Ellen Melville Centre, for example, where I don't actually have to spend any money. I can just go and meet people and socialise and get out of the house, and I don't have to spend money, and I'm in shelter. And those things are really important. Those are massive draws to the city. And I will also say that another big draw is that the city centre is, you know, where everything sort of connects. And so if mothers from Manukau or West Auckland are wanting to catch up for their Monday coffee groups, the city centre is the easiest way to get in, and half-price fares have only made that easier and more accessible. I see lots of mums on the buses now coming in with me at the same time to go to mamas groups. Yeah, so that's sort of where I would, sorry if I wasn't super specific on my answer there, but...
Troy?
I guess as a business person, when you you look at a place to set up a business, and if you haven't got the ability to be able to get a courier to deliver something because of the dramas around sorting out traffic flow in the city are still not solved after 24 months, and there's still no solution to that, that's a problem. If you haven't got parking that people know where they can go and park, obviously people can come in by the bus. My bus is great. I started riding the bus. I'm in North Shore. No complaints about that, but other ones are, there's issues with the bus services. So I think we've got to sort out some basic things first before you can go to someone and say, hey, look, there's a place, Upper Queen Street, set your business up, because no one's going there.
Just like to table that there's already quite a few studies coming through from Aotearoa of town centres that have tried to bring back parking to their centres and bring back free parking, and that did nothing. So they've reversed it. So I just want to debunk that idea.
Oh no, I'm not saying that. I think the whole plan, and I think before all of this, as Mark said, we had all these issues before all of this as well. We had security issues in the city, and we had problems, but we generally agreed as a city where we wanted to go in that direction. A lot of that changed over the whole COVID period.
The provocation for the central city in terms of transport is that if you want to drive to shops, you can go to Sylvia Park. You can go to Ponsonby Road.
That's the reason why.
Most of the shops in Ponsonby Road have had their main shops down in the central city as well. If you don't think it has to be done by car, Queen Street, the proposition in front of Queen Street is what is the better option? If most of the people in Queen Street arrive there day by day, not in a car, which is what happens now, most commuters and all the residents don't arrive by car. If all that's happening, then we're not really talking about a car-based solution for the central city. We're talking about an alternative to Sylvia Park, and that's how we need to evolve it. Mark?
Well, I mean, the shops will come back when the people come back, right? That's the first thing. That's just the law of economics.
But don't the shops have to get the people back?
Sure. So your question is kind of what are they doing, right? And look, I have no knowledge of the central city, but I was on a suburban business association for 6 years, right, dealing with individual people who own properties, and I can tell you it can be very challenging getting individual property owners to kind of agree on any kind of plan. You'd think if you've got an asset, you'd be interested in kind of, if there wasn't a tenant, you'd be interested in doing some marketing or some kind of pop-up stuff. I mean, we know this sort of stuff exists. I can say at scale, it's quite hard to do, right? The council, simply because the mayor is a cheerleader, has an ability to kind of lead in this direction. I mean, in times of crisis or challenge, we should be looking for our civic leaders to be able to sort of role model this, and we should be having our leaders out and about in the central city, for example, if they want people to come back.
One of the interesting things that's happened in Auckland, I've been in Auckland since 2004, so nearly 20 years. In my time here, Parnell and Ponsonby went down. They declined as centres. By the time of the Rugby World Cup, 2011, Ponsonby was struggling. Parnell and Ponsonby didn't give up. They turned themselves around. The business associations there went, we're not going to let this happen. We're going to change. We're going to prosper and grow, and we're going to do what it takes. And one of the key things that they did in Ponsonby was they said, let's create market days. Let's have a festive sense in the street so that people will come and enjoy shopping there. And, the shops put out stalls out the front, and some of them were selling fabulous stuff, and some of them were just getting rid of stock they couldn't move any other way. It didn't matter. They had a market day atmosphere, and it worked for them. Ponsonby is now a vital centre again, which is fantastic. Queen Street, you don't see that happening on Queen Street. You don't see that commitment to... It's up to us to make it work.
I mean, the parties I know of involved in the central city have lots on their plate. And my issue is, the issues are now so complex, the legacy issues I mentioned and also the COVID issues, is I think we need to have a special purpose vehicle created actually to try to make more progress to come out of this. We're going to have international tourists back in a couple of months. That'll help. But what are they going to be coming back to, right? So a special purpose vehicle, of course, the government's created a funding vehicle to kind of help make big urban development. Let's create a special purpose vehicle for the central city, short-term period. Let's bring in those landlords you're talking about. Let's bring in the Mission and other agencies who've got insight and expertise. Let's bring in government as well. The Auckland Policy Office would be very welcome to join. People who have skin in the game, but let's then give them decision-making power. So let's actually have council delegate as much as it can to this group to make decisions about the sorts of things that you had in your column.
Yeah, I mean, other than market days on Ponsonby Road, there's plenty of good examples throughout Auckland, whether it be Key Street or Karangapi Road, that have done open street days where they essentially close it to vehicles and open it up to pedestrians. And those things have time and time again proven the benefit of pedestrians and people walking past to businesses. And we should be looking at that for Queen Street. Like, that seems a very low-hanging fruit and a very inexpensive thing to do, to bring people back for a day and just rediscover Queen Street again. One of the most amazing things about Queen Street is, when it is closed, is that you can walk in the middle of it and you can actually see the buildings on either side. Most of the time you're stuck on the footpaths and you can't see how incredible Queen Street really is. It's actually really fascinating and really beautiful. And I think that people don't value it so much because you can't see it, because it's just a traffic sewer still. So yeah, pedestrianised Queen Street, that's the low-hanging fruit. Probably the cheapest idea as well.
Yeah, I just think that we've done some great things. Even over the COVID period, we've got a Bulgari store. I used to work for Bulgari in Japan, and had conversations with the CFO. And when you're going down to New Zealand, he said, "We're not going down there. The market's not there. They opened in the middle of COVID." So we're finally getting to a point where we're growing up as a city, I think, and I think we're past market days in Queen Street. And I think what we're missing is tourists. We're desperately missing tourists.
Okay.
We're desperately missing our students in the city.
But we know we're not going to get tourists back for a year or two. That's just not going to
We can
happen.
make it quicker.
July.
We also know that cruise ships are not the retail salvation of a city.
I'm not talking about cruise ships. We need to get real tourists back.
Oh, okay. I want to ask, we're running out of time, and I want to ask each of you to nominate one thing you think we should do. And I don't mean nominate a problem, I mean nominate an action that we should take. And before you get to it, I'm going to chuck something in myself. There was a speaker this morning who said, it's a really, really, I'm not going to say who it was, really, really important that we understand climate change, but I'm going to shout next time I hear anyone say climate change is really important, but it's not about climate change, but we've also got these economic issues that we've got to solve. The proposition now is we have to address climate change in the context of solving those other issues. Climate change is not a different thing from the economy. It's how do we make the economy work so that everybody prospers in a way that means we are also addressing the climate issues. And I wonder, therefore, whether the opportunity for Queen Street is to become the model centre of a city trying to become a model of what a 21st century city could be like, how good Auckland could be. My view is that you can do anything in this country almost better than anywhere else in the world, because there's a flexibility and an ease about also everything from setting up a business to running a rock band to whatever you want. And if anybody can do it, we should be able to do it. So maybe that's what Queen Street needs. Queen Street is the incubator of and the fascinating, engrossing, captivating heart of this is how a climate responsive city really operates. It's transport, it's all sorts of things. It's energy, it's the buildings, what we do with all those things, but it's all there and we all learn from it and we all take immense pride in it, and people come and have a look and enjoy it. What's your thing?
Yeah, my thing is, it's not a new idea. I don't think we need too many new ideas. I think we need to enact the City Centre Master Plan. I think we need to enact and fast track access for everyone. Pedestrianise Queen Street and support it with access for everyone. So making sure that delivery vehicles can still get in and out of the city, people with disability can still access their city, and make it a more, like, access for everyone is the plan to make it a more inclusive city and a more exciting and beautiful city. So let's do that. We don't need too many new ideas. We've already got them, actually.
I think one of the questions there is about Detroit 2013, don't walk out in the city for safety reasons. 2019, it's a city full of life, and I think that's the thing that I'm asking, and I'm really pleading for it. Let's get the security issue sorted. There's some groups set up already around this. Do the Warren Buffett thing, top 25 things need to solve the problem, only take the top 5.
And Detroit's really interesting, isn't it? Because it was a devastated city, so real security issues. So yes, police were really important in fixing that. Community organisations really important in fixing that.
Yep.
There are something like 30 urban farms in the urban area of Detroit. You know, growing vegetables. Schools are actively involved. All of those things. Exciting. Mark.
I agree with everything Emma said, but to make it happen, my special purpose vehicle could be the existing City Centre Advisory Group. So this is a committee of council most people won't know of. It runs the targeted rate for the central city. Generally work quite collaboratively together, have lots of different stakeholders. Auckland Transport and the other CCOs and councils should delegate all the decision-making responsibilities they have to that city for a specific purpose to address these issues we've talked about, to make faster progress on access to everyone, and to make the central city and Queen Street particularly more appealing for these visitors who will be arriving back shortly.
We are out of time. Emma, Troy, and Mark, thank you all very much. And I'm very sorry to those of you who sent in Slido questions. We didn't get to them, and I do apologise for that. But thank you all, and thank you. That's our session.
Thank you.